This is something you need to bear in mind. Unfortunately, as I said, some of the notes have not been printed in these books. They're fixing it up. We're going to get it just now when we have our coffee break. But in there is the payroll questionnaire, right? The one that SARS uses, Large Business Center one. And in that, they're specifically asking for this information, all right, where they're saying we want to conduct an interview. So they have got now, in terms of Section 47 of the Tax Administration Act, they have factored into effect saying a SARS official may, by notice, require a person, whether or not chargeable to tax, to attend in person at the time and place designated in the notice for the purpose of being interviewed by a SARS official concerning the tax affairs of the person if the interview, number one. So what are they saying over there? They can come to you and say, excuse me, ma'am, you work for company X, we'd like you to please be present at SARS so we can conduct an interview with you. Are you prepared for that? Do you know what they're going to ask you? Are you going to do it? You better have legal representation aspect in place, number one, because anything you then say as the staff member, imagine that, you're working in the payroll department, you've been there for 6 months, and SARS pulls you in and says, excuse me, is there anything you have found untoward in the payroll? What are you going to say? Guaranteed, if you've just been there for 6 months, you find problems, is it not? Every place you get to, you will find a problem. Eventually you get used to those problems because the boss tells you to do it like that, and eventually you forget about that problem. But you will find something everybody knows. And I can see smiles around the table. Everybody knows there's something wrong in your payroll. Correct? No. There's always something. We'll find it. There's always something you're not doing 100% correct. Like gift vouchers. Those little flowers you give to the people. Are you taxing it? No. So there's a problem. You understand what I'm saying? So now you're sitting across there as a payroll manager, a tax practitioner, an accountant, who's purely there only for one purpose in life, and that's to try and edge your way around making some money so you can satisfy everything else. Now you're getting cross-examined by people that look worse than me. You know what that means? All the boys from ex-murder and robbery squad. And they say to you, excuse me, sir, do you know of anything untoward in your payroll? Yes or no? A nod, okay? But the point being is, they record that. And if they go through your payroll and find out that you have lied to them, what have you done? You've committed an offense. What's that offense mean? A $2,000 fine or 12 months in jail. So what do? They pull that stunt to get you to turn state witness. I'm making you scared yet. This is reality. That's what can happen. Okay, we defend many matters like this. So you need to make sure, what am I being asked? Is it reasonable for you to ask anybody a question on the spur of the moment based on a complicated matter like a payroll system? You can't, because you don't know what the relevant is. I mean, there's 145 questions. You'll see in that questionnaire, there's 145 questions. Do you potentially know the answer to every single one of those? No, you'll probably have to go and have a look and just make sure, because they're asking you not just for this year, they're asking you for the last 5 years. So how can a reasonable person, you remember when we talk about reasonable and specific and relevant at the end of the day, even if they want to conduct the interview, you need to have an agenda. You need to know what is effective you're going to go through, okay? And this is the importance. Is intended to clarify issues of concern to SARS to render further verification or audit unnecessary, and is not for purposes of a criminal investigation. It might not be before you start opening your mouth and telling them what's going on, but it might be after that, okay? So you need to be careful on that. But this is the first thing that I asked SARS in that aspect. Is intended to clarify issues of concern to SARS to render further verification. So if you're phoning me to conduct an interview, based on that interpretation of Section 47, it means you know something's wrong already. Issues of concern to SARS. So if you have those issues, that's why you're phoning now to conduct this interview, please tell me what those are, and we can resolve it. If they say, no, we don't want to, then what is this? A fishing expedition. Because I can only do the interview if there is issues of concern. Are you following what I'm getting at you, guys? Sure, ma'am. Okay. The question is, The question is, what does it mean whether or not chargeable to tax or not? So in other words, you are the tax practitioner. I'm coming to ask you about your client. You are not chargeable to tax in terms of that client because of the fact that the client has got his own tax numbers. You've got your own. But I'm coming to ask you information about another taxpayer. Okay, we're following that now. Okay. Right, so these are the little things we need to know. Everything I've said today sounds very antagonistic and hard approach to SARS. No. It is purely there to stop non-compliance aspect in terms of administrative procedure and to protect yourselves and protect your client in that aspect, because you do not want to be interviewed. Because the worst of that interview is who makes the notes about what your response is? SARS. Do they give you that document? No, they just tell you to sign it before you leave. And imagine he writes over there, client, tax practitioner has confirmed that client he's got a secondary slush fund hidden away, da-da-da, and you sign that doc. Are you going to tell me afterwards you didn't know what you were signing? Is that defense? So why did you sign it in the first place? Okay? So please stay away from that. If need be, you find yourself an attorney or an accounting firm or tax practitioner's firm that acts as intermediary between SARS and yourself. Okay. Relevant material required by SARS under subject must be referred to in a notice with reasonable specific once again. It has to be specific. Okay? A person may decline to attend an interview if the distance between the place designated in the notice and the usual place of business or residence of the person exceeds the distance prescribed by the Commissioner by public notice. Right, so that's cool. You've got to stay in Cape Town and have your offices in Joburg. Done. Why? Because it's too far. I can't come. All right? That more works with clients that are staying overseas. You know, an aspect the person's out the country or something like that. But as I said, that's a last resort that can be in. Is there any other questions on that? Yes, sir.
Sorry, if SARS is doing a field audit on pays you earn, are they entitled to interview employees to see if there's compliance according to what payroll is telling them?
Okay, the question being posed is, if SARS is busy with a field audit, are they entitled to interview the employees to determine whether or not there is compliance on what their understanding of compliance is? The answer is, if you look at what Section 47 says, is intended to clarify reasoning. We're going to now get to a field audit where effectively it says you've got to have reasonable care. Right, now it's a very grey area, because theoretically they are entitled. I've had audits where, from a PYE perspective, to take it one step further, where SARS sends us the request for information, we respond accordingly, we give them the information, and they then go and contact the individuals to confirm their understanding exactly what you're saying, but they put it in black and white. All right, the only difference is it came straight back to us, so we answered on behalf saying, please refer to our presentation anyway. But it can happen like that, and we've got to be careful. Why? Because people do not understand the concept. Let's talk about a traveling allowance. So my question to the individual is, so how much is your traveling allowance? Well, every year we sit down and we look at it, and my practitioner says, well, this should be a good number, and I go and do it. Meantime, the office now, because they've spoken to somebody like us and said, no, every year we analyze what the person has done for business prior year, what they're doing currently, what their position, and we do the calculations, and that is how it's determined. So it's not just a thumb-suck percentage, but Mr. Joe Soap has just told them, well, whatever I tell them is a good number, they say it's fine. You understand the difference now, because they were not following the protocol. Or alternatively says, well, look, I don't travel much anymore, but for tax purposes it's great, because I've got a guy in Alberton and I pay $2,000 a year and gives me a logbook for nothing, you know? That kind of thing. So you don't want that to happen. And normally it is advisable to have a buffer between the SARS officials, because we'll get to what they're entitled to. All right? They're not entitled to roam freely and do whatever they want to at the end of the day, because what it says is, and we'll go through this place here, SARS official name and authorization, Section 41, bear that in mind, this is now for field audit, may require a person within prior notice of at least 10 business days to make available at the person's premises specified in a notice relevant material that the official may require to audit or criminally investigate in connection with administration of a tax act in relation to a person or other persons. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Has the
Yeah.
When you were dealing with Section 46, you said if it's a criminal matter and refer to a lawyer. So if, in fact, SARS were to approach a tax practitioner and ask them a question which is in this criminal area, which relates to them, do they have the right to decline? You say the furthest to our attorney, the furthest to the client's attorney.
Okay. There's a twofold aspect. Let me just tell me if I got it all right when I finish. All right. Firstly, the question is, does the employee that SARS wants to ask the question, does he or she have the right to decline to answer that question? Number one. And number two, if you're the tax practitioner and SARS comes along and you can see the questions being posed refer to a criminal aspect or do have a criminal aspect in place, can you decline to answer? In both instances, the answer is in the affirmative, depending whether or not you have, because firstly, if in the office aspect, Section 46 says, ask you for relevant material, okay? If you haven't had a reasonable, or if it's not deemed to be relevant at the end of the day, or you're not sure of what the answer is, nobody can compel you to answer it, okay? So you have to have a reasonable notice. So in other words, if SARS comes to the individual employee and says, excuse me, can you tell me about it? Saying, well, I can't answer now, I don't know, just give it to me in black and white, let me go think about it, just make sure my memory is correct and I've got everything in place, and then I can answer the question. The same with regards to the tax practitioner that has been asked questions which you can see are leading to the criminal aspect at the end of the day, the same response. No. Yes, you will answer it, but you're not going to answer it yourself. That's the point. You are now going to go straight to your attorney and saying, excuse me, we have an issue here. How do we handle this? It's stopping that immediate response, which is normal human nature, to say, yes, I've done it. The response, the question then posed. As a tax practitioner, and once I've now ducked the initial question and I've gone through the attorney aspect, do I have to respond? And do I have to respond through the attorney, or do I do it through my own capacity? The point being is, yes, you've ducked the initial question, your attorney will set it up, and you will effectively do it through your attorney. All right. So in other words, that's making sure that from a criminal procedure perspective, they are following protocol. All right. So you're not if you're being compelled to do it, that means they cannot turn around afterwards and use it against you. They can only utilize it against the client. Yes, you can be compelled. Yes, the question being asked, can a tax practitioner be compelled to give information? The answer is yes, you can. You do not share client-attorney privilege unless you're an attorney. So in other words, any practitioner, accountant in the normal fray of things can be compelled by SARS. It can be subpoenaed to actually give testimony.
So that also applies to the employee?
Correct. Also applies to the employee. Right, so now we've got this big stick. Everybody's aware now, because they can ask questions. So what do? Let's look at what they're telling us we can and cannot do and have to provide to SARS, because that's where our key is, okay? The notice referred to in subsection 1, that's at the bottom here, state the place, where, and the date, time, the audit or investigation due to start, which must be during normal business hours. Okay, so that's just a notification that you're getting at the end of the day. To say, and then it says, indicate the initial base and scope of the audit of or the investigation. So here's my first little thing. Did you see what they're saying? My letter says within 10 days, I'd like to come and do an audit at your premises. I will be conducting that audit at what time, where, and all the rest of it. And SARS has to give us the initial basis and scope of the audit or investigation. All right, are you following what I'm getting at here? The initial basis and scope of the audit. So coming back to our problem with our staff member that gets caught in the passage. And SARS asked the question. That wasn't in your initial scope to interview staff, was it? No. We are prepared for what, because you said this is the initial basis and scope of the audit. So we'll give you that information, but you didn't specify there that you need to interview individuals. We don't know where those individuals are. Alternatively, I don't know what you're requiring from me, because I need the initial basis or scope. Are you following what we're getting at here? So once again, we're ducking it, but we'll come back to that later. Okay. SARS is not required to give the notice if the person waives the right to receive the notice. This is a problem. Okay? If they phone you and say, we'd like to come and do an audit, and they say to you, do we need to send you any paperwork? What is a client normally going to do? And this is where you need to educate your clients. As I said, the good old days. I promise you, when I worked at SARS, I spent 9 years there, okay? How many times, and that was still the old school way. You remember, we did audits in the old days. If you cut me off for your Mercedes-Benz, we take your registration number, find out who you are, and we come visit you, okay? Yes, there was a little more to it than that, but that's how we used to operate in any case, okay? We would arrive at a client's premises, and everything is catered for. All the files are now nicely in pink and blue, covers all neatly done, put out, and the coffee and the cook sisters and everything else is all laid out and everything's done, okay? And that is still the general perception by all clients. The friendlier you are with SARS and the less issues they give you, the quicker they're going to be in and out, right? Which is true. But do not waive your rights. Because if SARS phones you and says, well, I intend to come and do an audit next week, is that fine with you? And the client says, yes, it's not a problem. Says, look, we're supposed to send you a letter to tell you all this. No, don't worry about that. It's fine. Just come and do what you want to. We'll have everything, which period. You've just now waived your right to receive the notice of what that initial scope and basis of that audit is. Are you following what I'm getting at here? So you're going to be totally unprepared. Now do you have a right to say, sorry, I can't answer your question? The answer is no, because you have given up your right to receive the notice to say what this assessment is, what this audit's going to be about. Okay? So we need to educate, make sure we know what we're talking about. And it's normal. You go to your bank manager, what do you take with you every time? IDs, proof of payment, proof of residence, bank statements, balance sheets. Is that not normal? Do they tell you when you go see the bank manager you need to bring all this stuff? No, we understand that. All right? In the same process, we need to follow with SARS saying, what do you want? Okay? If a person at least 5 business days before the date listed in notice advances reasonable grounds for varying the notice, SARS may vary the notice according to subject conditions SARS may impose with regard to proprietary measures for the audit or investigation. So, 5 days before, you can still say to them, look guys, sorry, we haven't got all the info, the person responsible is on a course, the person's not here, we can extend it, all that within a reasonable aspect. Okay, so that can be done. A SARS official may not enter, where are we back again here? SARS official may not enter a dwelling or domestic premise except as part, that's the same as the normal, right? So they can't walk into your house anyway unless you say it's fine. Okay, so we've got some aspect there as to what they can and cannot do. But more importantly, what do we have to provide? A person on whose premises an audit or criminal investigation is carried out and any other person on the premises must provide such reasonable assistance as is required by SARS to conduct the audit and investigation, including. All right, now let's just stop there. Go back. Provide such reasonable assistance. You following what we're getting at here? I'm asking you a question in your individual capacity about something that happened 3 years ago. Why an audit is never conducted on the current month, is it? Not from a PYE perspective. Because they're going back, we want to do 5 years back. So it is reasonable to assume that when you get asked a question verbally, you can't respond, you'll need to go and find out what's going on. Is that not reasonable? Right, let me give you an example. Who of you know what you had for breakfast last week, Tuesday? And don't say yes because I have the same thing every morning. I'm talking about the norm. Do you know what you had for breakfast last week, Tuesday? So how are you going to know what happened in your payroll 3 years ago? Am I being reasonable? That's how the courts would view it too. Okay? So reasonable aspect. I'm just giving you a bit of buffers in between and take back what you need out of this, but that's how we work it. Now, what do you have to do? Making available appropriate facilities to the extent that such facilities are available. So in other words, what do you want to do? You do not want to put SARS officials in your payroll department, do you? You want to put them into a boardroom. Because they don't have the retina scan, the toe scan and all the rest to get into the payroll department. That's what you want to keep that way, all right? So you put them into a facility that they can use in that aspect to do it. And then you make sure that you have your one representative at the end of the day acting as the go-between to go get documentation information, which means you keep them away from your staff. Are you following? Are you being unreasonable? No. They say we must give you a facility. There's your facility. If available. And if not available, put up an umbrella and some deck chairs outside. No, I mean, be realistic at the end of the day. But yes, answer questions relating to the audit investigation. Yes, we'll answer it. It doesn't mean to say we answer it now. So what do? You go through. This is how you conduct a field audit. In the morning, SARS will first go to the office and then they'll come down to your premises. They'll run through the process of their audit, and you acting as an intermediary, you go in there just before they leave. They also leave at about 3 or 3:30, depends on the circumstance, and say, ladies and gents, is there anything that you have found today that's untoward, or something that you need more clarity on, or something that we need to explain a little better? Is there anything that's worrying you? And if the answer is yes, well then you get a list of what you need to look at. If the answer is no, what do? In both circumstances, you go back that same afternoon before you go home, and you send an email to that SARS official saying, following our discussion today, you said, no, you don't need anything, or this is what you specifically need. Why are we doing this? It's to make sure that you are giving them the opportunity to ask all relevant questions. Do you understand what I'm getting at here? And why is that so important? So that when we get a letter of findings, and that letter of findings is totally askew because they haven't got the facts and understanding of what's happening in your company, you've got one aspect to say, but I've asked you and I've tended to give you reasons and explanations and anything that you found that you didn't understand and you ignored it. Now you want to raise an assessment. Is that reasonable? Okay? All fine? Okay. Submit relevant material as required. Perfect. I will give it to you. You ask me, you want a list of everybody that received the traveling allowance? Great. Let me get it together for you. Can I give it for you tomorrow? You're still answering and you're still giving the information. But what you're not doing is spur of the moment answering. And quickly saying, I need personnel file for Steve. Okay, HR, I want a personnel file for Steve. Here we go. Here's the file, SARS, in total. Thank you. What's on the second page? Congratulations on your wedding. We hope you enjoyed this Panasonic TV we've given you. Was our text on this Panasonic TV? Answer is no. Do you know how much nonsense is in HR files when it comes from a payroll and tax perspective? You won't believe the things in there, because from a human resource perspective, and all of you involved in that, my humble apologies, but I call HR the tissue box squad. Okay? Why? Because if someone's got a problem, they run over and go cry by them. Okay? And the difference in the interpretation in that aspect is found in those files. So before you hand that over, you make sure there's nothing funny in those files. You know, here's my traveling allowance. It doesn't help. How many times do I see it? And I'll give you another example. Here's our traveling allowance policy. You have to travel you have to travel for business purposes, number one. You have to allocate every year, tell us how much you've been doing for business and private. Number three, if you're in a position that no longer requires to be a traveling allowance, you're pleased to tell us, and there's a whole method. That's our policy, so it's great. Your policy is now being ticked off by your legal department saying, yes, from a tax perspective, everything meets the requirements. Then we go to HR file and say, how's it, Steve? Don't you just want to adjust my traveling allowance to 25% of my package this year? I want to buy a new car and I need that as a minimum so that I don't have to pay for lease. I don't have to put down a deposit. Cool, done. Now what does that mean in comparison to your policy? It means you're not adhering to your policy. So it puts a light on all your traveling allowances, and then SARS says, come and prove that every single one of those individuals that got one actually deserve one. Do you understand the nightmare now in admin aspect behind it? So, as I said, do not hand over things like that immediately. You will give it to them, but just the next day. Once you've looked through it and make sure these pages are not relevant in the bigger picture of things. Okay? No person may, without